Setting is one of the most important aspects in telling a story. In a novel, it helps the readers create a vivid mental image, while in a movie, we are physically shown the setting and in this case shown the beautiful land of Mordor. We start off with the Shire. The Shire is the exclusive home to hobbits. Our hero, Frodo Baggins, is one of these hobbit residents. But what does the Shire look like? In Tolkien's novel, The Fellowship of the Ring, is explained as such. 40 leagues it stretched from the far downs to the Brandywine Bridge, and 50 from the northern moors to the marshes in the south. That is on page 6. This can be difficult to imagine in your mind. However, the movie shows us perfectly what the Shire would potentially look like in this clip.
So how is the old rascal? I hear it's going to be a party of special magnificence.
You know Bilbo. He's got the whole place in an uproar.
Well, that should please him.
Half the Shire's been invited, and the rest of them are turning up anyway.
And so life in the Shire goes on, very much as it has this past age, full of its own comings and goings, with change coming slowly, if it comes at all. For things are made to endure in the Shire, passing from one generation to the next. There's always been a Baggins living here.
What's quite interesting is that the Shire was shot in Peter Jackson's home of New Zealand. Peter Jackson chose a perfect place to create the Shire. We are introduced to the Shire as Gandalf and Frodo cross the bridge, with the Hobbit homes in their view. Tolkien describes the Hobbit homes as such. The house and the holes of Shire hobbits were often large and inhabited by large families. That is on page 9. Tolkien describes the homes as being often large, while at first glance they seem quite small in the movie. However, they are much larger once you get closer and get a better look, and as well as seen inside the homes. We take a look at Bag End in particular. It seems quite large and is the home of Frodo and Bilbo. Another important place and setting in Lord of the Rings' Fellowship of the Ring is an elvish realm that holds the name of Rivendell. We get our first sense for its atmosphere in the book. Shadows had fallen in the valley below, but there was still a light on the faces of the mountains far above. The air was warm, the sound of running and falling water was loud, and the evening was filled with a faint scent of trees and flowers, as if summer still lingered in Elrond's garden. That is on page 294. While in the movie we are shown a lawn shot of Rivendell right after Frodo awakens, and we are shown a closer shot of Rivendell's architecture as Frodo steps upon the balcony of his room. There is no emphasis on sound as there was in the novel for this scene. It focuses more on Frodo being reunited with his hobbit companions rather than the setting itself. The movie also set it in daylight rather than nighttime like the book. In the book, Gandalf is leading Frodo and Bilbo to the council. Tolkien describes the setting once again. Gandalf led them to the porch where Frodo had found his friends the evening before. The light of the clear autumn morning was now glowing in the valley. The noise of bubbling waters came up from the foaming riverbed. Birds were singing and a wholesome peace lay on the land. That is on page 311. In the movie, they removed Bilbo from the council entirely, and hence was not with Frodo and Gandalf as they went to the council. As reading through the book, I did not notice any reference of setting to where the actual secret council took place. However, in the movie, they are gathered in a semicircle facing Elrond. It seems to be taking place on a ridge or balcony of some sorts on the edge of one of Rivendell's buildings, with trees, greenery, mountains, and waterfalls in the background. Another important place in the story is Lothlorien. Lothlorien is another elven realm and is probably the fairest realm among them. Under the night, the trees stood tall before them, arched over the road and stream that ran suddenly beneath their spreading boughs. That is on page 439. This took place in the book as the Fellowship were a few leagues away from Lothlorien, and Legolas and Aragorn are getting excited for reaching Lothlorien, and they start telling stories. While in the movie, they do not focus on this part as much, and Legolas and Aragorn do not seem as joyful to be close to Lothlorien. They simply just walk through a forest area. The company filed slowly along the paths in the wood. led by Heldir, while the other elf walked behind. They felt the ground beneath their feet smooth and soft, and after a while they walked more freely, without fear of hurt or fall. Being deprived of sight, Frodo found his hearing and other senses sharpened. He could smell the trees and the trodden grass. He could hear many different notes in the rustle of the leaves overhead. The river murmuring away on his right, and the thin, clear voices of birds high in the sky. He felt the sun upon his face and hands when they passed through an open glade. That is on page 454. In the movie, the Fellowship indeed follows a single-filed line through a path in a forestry area surrounded by trees and with the sun gleaming through them, which then proceeds to a bird's-eye view shot of them walking along a staircase that surrounds large trees. Moria is an underground dwarven city underneath the misty mountains of Mordor, and is another important place of the story. This city was left abandoned during the duration of the Third Age. At the top, as high as Gandalf could reach, was an arch of interlacing letters in Elvish character. Below, though the threads were in places blurred or broken, the outline could be seen of an anvil and a hammer surmounted by a crown with 7 stars. Beneath these again were 2 trees, each bearing crescent moons. More clearly than all else there shone forth in the middle of the door a single star with many rays. That is on page 397. This occurred when Gandalf was investigating on how to open the invisible dwarf door. This setting took place on a cliffside. Tolkien provides an image of the encryption in the novel. The movie represents this scene quite well. It shows Gandalf running his fingers on a mountain or cliff with what seems to be a pond that surrounds them. The setting is effective because of the use of lighting and the moon, as well as the special effects of the encrypted invisible door. And it is very well done in comparison to Tolkien's image inside his book. As the wizard passed on ahead up the great steps, he held his staff aloft, and from its tip there came a faint radiance. The wide stairway was sound and undamaged. 200 steps they counted, broad and shallow, and at the top they found an arched passage with a level floor leading on into the dark. That is on page 403. The movie really captured the essence of darkness during this part of the movie. After our heroes realize they are in a tomb and not a mine, they notice bones and remains of the deceased. We see them climb these stairs, and with the way it was edited at the time, it goes by quickly. They are surrounded in what looks to be a cavern and in utter darkness, except Gandalf's staff is lighting their way up. Now I'll be talking about some critics and fans and see what they think about the movie and book. The movie has outstanding reviews. Rotten Tomatoes gave them a 91%, which is hard to get from them, and Empire gave them a perfect 5 out of 5. Fellowship hasn't rescued an otherwise dreadful year. It at least gives us something to look forward to, same time, next year. Jack Matthews, New York Daily News. Masterfully placed, the movie builds slowly, introducing the mythology, habitats, and lifestyles of Tolkien's creatures. David Germain, Associated Press. I have no serious criticisms. The film does full justice to Tolkien, who has often and erroneously been accused of escapism. Christopher Tukey, Daily Mail, UK. Tolkien's novel is extremely popular and has sold many copies. Goodreads gives it a 4.3 out of 5. Common Sense Media gives it a 5 out of 5. With this spectacular tale, Tolkien invented not only a language and a land in which it was spoken, but also, unintentionally, a new literary genre. Tolkien was perhaps the first author to create a fully realized, authentic, seeming world, brimming with various cultures and creatures engaged in existence that accepted magic. It is as fully realized as our own. What is it that draws generations of adolescents and latecomer adults to Middle-earth? Epic battles, yes, but inner turmoil too. Overwhelming forces of evil, but also temptation and greed within oneself. Potent sorcery, but perhaps more so the magical spells of friendship and loyalty and devotion. This is the kind of story the word epic seems to have been invented for, but is also an intimate tale about the bonds among companions and about the human instinct to do the right thing. From these simple features, it derives its true power. This review was written by Mark Nicole on Common Sense Media. After hearing what critics think about this story, it's time to see what the fans think. Tolkien has created something so unique, so intelligent, that even all these years later, it is the paragon of high fantasy. I first read it 1 year ago, which would be 2016, and it still echoes in my mind. This was said by Grace from Australia. When I first read this book, I was 11 years old. This book is an amazing picture, like you're right there and are watching it all happen. That is from Joshua, who is from South Africa. And that was for the book. This is for the movie. A great start to one of the greatest film adventures of our time, The Fellowship of the Ring sets a high standard for the rest of the saga, taking great strides in character development and the storyline. The first installment of the series proves to be well made, beautifully shot, and filled with exhilarating action pieces. That was by Case Volabret. I like The Fellowship of the Ring. It's a great beginning of a story, sets the tone for the remaining films, and has a lot of references to The Hobbit that I picked up since seeing those films. This was said by Ryan Doherty, who is my Durham College classmate. It is amazing to see what can happen when someone's ideas are put into a book, and it creates a real sense of community. And everyone and fans, there's fans around the world that will talk to each other on the internet, in forums, or in reviews, or comments, and they just talk with one another and say what they liked about the story, and what if they didn't like the story and why, and they just talk to each other and compare what they feel about what they feel about the story. It is awesome to see, and I myself am a huge fan of Lord of the Rings, and I really enjoyed the movies and also the books. I haven't read all the books, I've only read a bit of the books, but I have seen all the movies, and I really, really enjoyed them. And I actually saw the Hobbit movies first, which just made me want to see the Lord of the Rings movies, because I watched the Lord of the Rings movies a bit late, but it's better late than never. Thank you for listening to my report, and I hope that you too share the passion for Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, and Star Wars that I do. Thank you.